Hello, my name is Robert Joffe, and I am about to present you homework 1 in the course T7010T Polymer Science and Engineering, Part 2 Processing and Design. So the homework 1 is actually dedicated to characterization of thermal properties of polymers, and in particular it's about differential scanning calorimetry technique. So basically what you have to do within this homework, you have to describe basic principles of this technique and answer the following questions. Question 1 is quite straightforward in my opinion, and you have to describe what is actually measured during the DSC test. So basically what you present after you have collected experimental results and so on. Question 2 is related to terminology, and it actually asks you what do you call transition reaction where heat is released and consumed? Or actually in this case or consumed, because it doesn't happen at the same time. So you have to give terms for these or define these processes, and you have to give also example of such events, what physical kind of events, what happens with the polymer and how it is registered in DSC when the heat is released and consumed. Question 3 now is related to the graph, which you can see. This is a plot from DSC, and basically the question is if you can identify polymer based on that graph. And of course you have to explain how identification was done. If you look on the next question, actually those two will be quite related. If you look, let's go to question 4, and the question actually is about what do you get from the DSC plot, what kind of important properties of polymers you can obtain. And I would like you to make some markings on this plot and describe what you are measuring from that. And of course, if you can identify this polymer also, that would be as a bonus, but it's not a must, so to speak. Anyway, as you can see, questions 3 and 4 are very much related. If you look at the question 5, again you are given a DSC plot on the right side here. And now the question will be what type of polymer we see here. Is it a thermoset or thermoplastic? And also, once you identify that, you should be able to answer the question what happens if you run this test 2 times on the same polymer. So you can see here first scan and a second scan, and the question is then why they are different, what does it mean, and what does it tell you about the polymer. In order to answer all those questions, you have to study certain lectures and read certain chapters, and in this case, of course, there is a lecture on thermal analysis or thermal characterization of polymers, in particular DSC, as I mentioned. And then there is a lecture in general about polymers, like introduction lecture, that would be lecture 1. And of course lecture about thermal properties, which is lecture 7. After you have looked through those lectures, I advise you to read corresponding chapters from the compendium. It wouldn't hurt also to check the list with the polymers you're supposed to know. That is given under the miscellaneous in front there. And what does it mean, polymers you have to know, is that you actually should be able to identify those polymers from a chemical structure, and as well know some of the important thermal properties of those polymers. If you know that, you should be able to identify polymers just by looking at the DSC curve. Well, once you have answered those questions, you actually have to compile a report, and the report has to be written in scientific style, as I mentioned in our previous lectures, or actually in the general question lecture. What does it mean? It means that it should contain essential parts of the scientific paper, such as introduction, objectives, experimental results and discussion, and also summary and references. What you put in those parts is that in introduction, obviously, you can state why DSC is important, what do you do with it. In objectives, of course, you state that you want to learn about DSC, and that's what actually the homework is about. A technique itself you can describe in experimental part, and of course in results and discussions, something you can put in are those graphs, and then of course analysis of the graphs from DSC plots. And at the end you give a summary what you have learned, and of course present references if you use something else than lectures, or even if you just present lectures there, that's fine too. I expect you to incorporate your answers into the text of the report. For example, those definitions you can give is an introduction or experimental, and like I mentioned, the analysis of results can be given in results and discussion. If you would like to bring out that places in the report that you are actually answering those questions, you can use some kind of mark, special mark for it. For example, I don't know, star or plus, or put font in a different types, like italic, for example. That would also make easier for me to find where you have actually addressed those questions. But otherwise, it has to be kind of a smooth report. I'm not setting any requirements on the number of pages. It just has to be good enough to answer those questions and to explain things about DSC, what it is, how it works, what it measures, and so on and so forth. The submission, that's important to know when you have to submit your report, and you basically are given 1 week after the homework is initiated. And of course, report has to be submitted via Fronter. You will have a separate map or folder there, and it will be closing at 5 o'clock afternoon of the day of the submission. For example, if I initiate homework, and initiating is done basically by I am sending email to everyone who is taking a course. So if I initiate, let's say, it by 1st of March, then 8th of March would be the day of submission, and you have to submit it by 5 o'clock on that day. Well, actually, the date and time of submission also will be given in PDF file with the homework questions. Well, I hope this short presentation will help you to fulfill this or to complete this homework. And if you have additional questions, of course, you're welcome to ask through email. I wish you good luck. Bye bye.